What's up, everybody? This is episode 70 of Hoops Talk with Dave's Joint. Shout outs to everybody that's been supporting us thus far. For those who haven't seen any of my content, go check it out on YouTube, Facebook, and IGTV. But without further ado, we have a very special guest here today. This man is a pioneer of basketball in not just New York City, but around the country. He's been involved with grassroots basketball for close to 30 years, has coached some of your favorite NBA players of yesteryear, and has developed one of the best tournaments in the country in Las Vegas. But without further ado, I give you Mr. Gary Charles. Gary, thank you for coming on, to share your testimonial, man.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on. I'm enjoying this moment to be here.
Indeed. So my first question for you is, when did basketball first start for you?
What do you mean, as a kid?
Yes.
Okay. Started in sixth grade. I moved out to Long Island at that time. I just moved out to Roosevelt, Long Island, the home of Dr. J. I had the pleasure of growing up with Eddie Murphy, Chuck D from Public Enemy,
Wow.
and Steve Mills, the former president of the New York Knicks. We all grew up together in Roosevelt in a small one square mile town called Roosevelt. And although I played a little bit when I was in Brooklyn in the fifth grade, but it really started in sixth grade when I moved out here in Long Island and Roosevelt.
Nice. So you're originally from Brooklyn?
I was actually born in Haiti, and I came up here at 7 years old, and my parents at that time lived in East New York. Now, how about this? On Sheffield Avenue, which is right down the block from Jefferson.
Mm-hmm.
So I lived in Brooklyn from Haiti for the first 5 years.
Wow.
Yeah. So I enjoyed Brooklyn, at the time. Really did. But I was going, it's amazing, I was going to a school across town, a Catholic school over
Nice.
off Eastern Parkway. For lunch at time, we used to go hang out at the park, the big park over there. So I remember my years. Finally, I used to go roller skating in that area back in those days.
Indeed. So talk about, growing up in Roosevelt, Long Island, and what's the basketball culture like in Long Island?
Well, in Roosevelt and being in the suburb, it's like you played everything. My dad wouldn't let you back in the house, so you had to go play everything. So we played basketball, baseball, football. I ran track. I even bowled. Basketball was great, at the time. And I used to play in the traveling teams. That's how that was my first initiation to travel basketball. We used to go on something called the Little Lab basketball, in which way you travel around the country, and you stayed at other people's homes. I'll say this: that was an amazing time to me, because every home we ended up staying at was a white family, and they were the best. It's the first time I learned how to ride a horse. It was the first time I think I got maple syrup off a tree, just based off the different, people that we lived in, and they were showing me these things. So my, growing up and the relationship with white people was different than a lot of other people. I didn't see, for the longest time, I didn't see the racism or anything else. My relationship was always great, growing up with them. But back to your question as far as basketball, I mean, we all played basketball. I mean, we weren't as good as the city, but Long Island basketball was really good, and Roosevelt basketball was even better. Okay, so as you can imagine, like I said, Steve Mills and people like that, Dr. J, all came from Roosevelt. So the basketball was good.
So what was high school like for you?
So in 10th grade, I transferred from Roosevelt High School, which I didn't want to. My mother made me. I had passed a test that allowed you to go to another school. And it was for either technical engineering, mechanical engineering, or electronic engineering. 3-hour courses, 3 hours. You were sitting in a classroom for 3 hours, for, during the day. And it was at another school. I passed the test. My mother found out the week before school was starting. And she said, well, you going there? I said, no, I'm not. But first day, I was on that bus going to that school. And I remember Chuck D laughing at me because he was in the back of the bus because he had been there the year before. He had started, he was at that school. So obviously going there, I was like big man on campus, so to speak, because the few blacks that were there were ball players, and we added a lot to the probably like 99% white school.
Nice. So, what school is this?
It was called, still is called W. Chester Clark High School, which was like right near Westbury, Long Island. It was actually maybe on the other side of Westbury. So because Westbury High School was right there, so that was one of our rival schools that we would play against. We played against East Meadow. Matter of fact, I think we played against Matt Doherty. So Matt Doherty went to East Meadow, so we played against Matt. I think we might have played. We played against Holy Trinity, but it was more scrimmages. And Holy Trinity, I think I want to say. Well, Billy was after, because that's the school that Billy Donovan ended up, going to. So Billy, at his early stage, probably played a couple games for me with the Panthers, way back then. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So what year did you graduate from W. Chester Clark?
That was 79.
All right.
Yeah.
Shout out to the class of 1979. A good one. A lot of good things happened in 1979. Magic Johnson and Larry Bird in the NCAA championship.
That was big. I could not believe what I was watching. And people who don't know, at that time, I don't know, there was maybe 4 or 5 channels. That was it, back then, okay? So to be able to watch a game like that was just, phenomenal. That was big. They changed the game. They saved, I thought, the NBA, at the time, and I think they started to get people to focus on watching a lot of college games with their performance that year.
So where did you go to college?
I went to HBCU. I went to, at that time it was called Cheyney State. It's now called Cheyney University.
Cheyney U.
Yep, but here's the other big thing about that. At that time, Coach John Cheyney, who ended up going to Temple, was the coach. So was Vivian Stringer, who is now the coach of Rutgers. So imagine having those 2 Hall of Famers at the school. In fact, I think the year before, or 2 years before that, Cheyney had won the year I got in. By the way, excuse me, let me backtrack. I said 79. 79 was when I went. I graduated from Cheyney in 83, but I started in 79. But those 2 were phenomenal coaches. They really were. And Coach John Cheyney was actually my physical ed teacher for 2 years while I was at Cheyney. And he would stop class 10, 15 minutes early and make you sit down and just talk to you about life lessons. I never forgot those speeches he used to give.
That John Cheyney is a legend. I remember not too long ago, this was back in January when Temple played Villanova. As I was leaving that arena, on Temple's campus, I seen the statue of John Cheyney. I'm like, yo, this man is a legend.
He was unbelievable. And I kept saying, how long are we going to be able to hold on to this man when we were Cheyney? I was in shock that that's where he was at, because you knew he was headed for big time and that he was already, big time. And what's crazy is at that time, the women basketball were Division I. So the women were more popular than the men, at the time. I can't even remember at times when we were playing pickup, we would choose some of the girls on our team over the guys because the girls were that good. And one of the years, we had a young lady that would have made it to on the Olympic team. Her name was Valerie Walker, 1980, but we boycotted Not boycotted. Well, I guess, yeah, we boycotted. We didn't go to the Olympic that year, but she would have been on the Olympic team. So our girls were that good.
Wow. I mean, that's awesome right there.
Yeah, matter of fact, I want to say 81, the girls made it to the national championship game. Yeah, we lost to, I think, was it Louisiana State, I believe, in a game televised by CBS, national championship for the women.
So after college, what you went on to Wall Street, correct?
Yeah, well, you know what? Came home. I had a job waiting. If there's one advice I can give to kids is this, is that do internship. When you're in college in the summer, you should learn how to do an internship, because if you pick the right one, you could end up with a job waiting for you once you graduated. So I did. I had a job waiting for me. I was a scientific engineer. That was my first job, scientific engineer, which was out here in Long Island, working on the J-Star project that Ronald Reagan had started, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And then a couple years later, I went to Wall Street, yes.
Nice. So how was it, during your time working in Wall Street, and how long did you work in Wall Street?
Well, I worked on Wall Street for over 20 years. And
Wow.
yeah, so Wall Street is the reason why I didn't go into college coaching or do other things, because I was doing just fine right where I was at. I was, systems programmer. I started out, at Citibank on Wall Street. So I enjoyed it. There weren't a proliferation of blacks there. So I always knew I had to be, on my game. Because I knew there would be other people coming behind me, and I knew people were looking at me, to not mess up. So I need to be correct at all times. So, so those were special time and heightened time. And those were times that when you did see a black, you gave that black nod, that black nod, like, yeah, I see you, man, So that's what I remember.
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. So, 1988 comes. What made you decide to start the program that you first founded, then known as the Long Island Panthers? Like, how did the idea come about?
Well, as I mentioned, I used to play little lad basketball. And so when I got back home, at some point, I'm all into my little groove of Wall Street and everything else. And I was asked by the elders, Gary, can you take over? Can you create the program? He said, listen, we were there for you, but now, we're getting old. We need someone to take over. So there's no way I could say no to them. So the first thing I did within Roosevelt, I got the young kids together. I think it was like age 6 to like maybe 14, 200 kids. And I started a basketball league just for Roosevelt in there. But within that, I ended up getting an all-star team from all the kids. And I went to a couple of tournaments with them. One was called the Delaware Shootout at the University of Delaware. A gentleman by the name of Jim Dooley created that one. And there was another tournament called the Low Lad. So I was still doing the Low Lad stuff, and that one was in Trenton, New Jersey. First time I ever saw Stephon Marbury. And I got to see some great guys at the Delaware tournament. One of them was Travis Best. And Travis Best, I think, dropped 40 on us. And that's when I realized that, wow, there's a bigger picture here. There's an opportunity to get maybe the better players in Long Island so they can get a scholarship, because now I was just seeing a different, form of basketball that I didn't even know existed at the time. And then when I saw Stephon, I was like, really like, wow. And I want to say it was Dave Jones was coaching the Gauchos at the time. And when the tournament was over in Little Lad, which is, I think, the end of March, maybe beginning of April, well, in Long Island, after that, you typically go play baseball. So I said to him, well, I guess I'll see you next year. We're done for the year. He said, done for the year? We're just getting started. I said, what do you mean just getting started? He said, if you want to get good at this game, it's got to be 24/7. And that was the first time I heard the word 24/7.
Wow.
I said, oh, okay. And I was like, what are you going to do next? And he must have said to me, we have our own gym. I'm like, your own gym? That's unheard of. And he said that, and he told me about some of the things they were going to do. And I said, you have got to be kidding me. I'm thinking our season is over. These guys are just getting started. So I knew I had to go pick up my game and, and do some stuff in Long Island.
Wow. So what was like the first, great team that you guys had with the Panthers?
The Panthers. You know what? Believe it or not, I think that Zenna Hamilton, Skip to my Lou, Duane Woodward, 40, who's the assistant coach at Seton Hall right now. We're on the team, along with Jamal Smiley. I thought that was a great team. We had another forward named Mo Curtis. We ended up going to Florida. They were great, but as I tell people, Zenna got us to the top, and then Lamar Odom and Speedy Claxton got us over the top. So I would think that people would say that was probably our first really great team because we beat Riverside at the Golden Hoops, And I remember it was a big thing for a lot of people. As to me, it was like, well, yeah, I expected this. I mean, this is where we was headed. So Lamar and Speedy just took us to another level. And we had Malik Allen. So we had 3 future pros, in that team. So that team couldn't be stopped. We were really, really good.
So how was it, coaching Lamar Odom in high school?
I tell people this all the time. Lamar is probably in the top 5 of nicest young man had ever been around. Lamar, I could yell at him. I could say, whatever. And it was fine. I mean, times have changed. What you have to remember now is that they were all great teams in New York because there wasn't a grassroots team on every corner, so to speak. There was Riverside, there was the Gauchos, there was Madison Broncos, there was Brooklyn USA with Ziggy, and obviously, us, in Long Island. Those were the main powerful teams, at the time. So coaching the Lamar and the Speedy was really easy, okay, because they were all about getting their game better. They were about, winning. And it was, let's get on the floor. Let's get it done. We had another young man from Brooklyn, boys and girls named Nolan Johnson, who was terrific. He ended up going to Oklahoma. Nolan was a bad boy. He ended up, I think, he was probably all conference in the Big 12 by the time he got done. So we were really, really good. And I think the other thing that separates us now, I mean, back then and now, when we travel, we rooted for each other. It was New York. We didn't root against each other. Sometimes we hung around and watched each other play and rooted for each other. So when we were home, obviously, we're competing against each other, but it was total respect, back then for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you could see nowadays, I mean, there's, like you said, there's basically no rooting for each other anymore. And probably because, the sneaker companies have gotten involved. And, now it's like, if you really look at tournaments like Rumble in the Bronx, a lot of the sneakers company teams, they won't play against one another, probably because they feel like, A, they don't have anything to prove, or B, they feel like, I'm not trying to get embarrassed by such and such team.
Right.
So, what I'm saying? Like, there's no point in us playing in certain tournaments. Or if they do put their teams in tournaments, they won't have the bigger name players on there.
Back in those days, one of the biggest rivals was Lamar versus Juan Artest games. And people was looking forward to that. So that's what I meant about the competition. This is what people would look forward to. Lamar versus Juan Artest. It would be Malik Allen versus Elton Brand, because they were on Riverside. Elton Brand and Juan Artest was on Riverside, and then they had Eric Barkley. So it would be Eric Barkley versus Speedy Claxton. Those were, big-time games at the time. And by the way, that brings up something else. That's why I tell people stop with the revisionist history, because I'm still alive. Lamar was with the Panthers, okay, for over 3 years, not Riverside. Lamar did play in a couple events with them, But like I tell people, back then it wasn't a rival, so if we weren't doing anything, and he'll call me up, coach, you cool? I'm gonna go play with so and so for this weekend. You're not doing anything. I'm like, hey, go ahead. So now you look back at it, Riverside, wants to say, or people have said, well, Lamar was Riverside. No. He did play with them in a couple of events, but even I think I saw Ron Artest's Showtime thing where they went 56-1 that year. It's the year we had Lamar. He didn't have Lamar. Lamar was with us. That year.
Yeah,
So why are you making up that statement? Because I don't think you're being fair now to the team you had.
Right.
It was phenomenal. So don't disrespect those guys, okay? And don't disrespect us. Because in that particular team, we also had Khalid El-Amin, who was one of the best point guards that I've ever coached. He was phenomenal. He went out to UConn and helped them win a national championship. What people don't even remember is that he got drafted, was actually played in the All-Star rookie game his first year. Okay, so we were phenomenal in our own right.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And I was actually at the game that they lost that particular year. They lost the Baron Davis team in LA. Okay. Mm-hmm. And we beat the Shea Cotton team who hadn't lost in 2 years. We beat them, and we were going to play Baron and them in a championship game that particular year. But we had to be in Vegas. So Sonny called me and said, get your behind to Vegas. You guys are already late. So we had to skip out in the championship. And to this day, Lamar and I recently had just talked about that. He still remembers. We had to drive out to Vegas and skip on that. So what ended up happening is they let Riverside go play in the championship, and Barron weren't happy about that, so they didn't play in the game. And that's how, honestly, why Riverside got that championship, okay? So I'm just going to give you true history as to what happened, because they would not have won that championship, okay? So if you guys are going to go make up stuff, now I'm going to tell you the truth as to what happened that particular year. But that doesn't take away from them, because they were a phenomenal team that year.
Well, this is the stuff, everybody, if you watching this is the stuff that HBO probably didn't, or Showtime didn't want you guys to know about.
Exactly.
But to your defense, Lamar definitely did mention the Panthers heavy in his book. I haven't finished reading that, but he did mention you guys heavily. He did claim playing for you. And on that that picture with him, Eric Barkley,
Monotest, Elton Brand. That picture for you. Go ahead.
That picture, he actually, that was true that he was playing for you, but they didn't show the Panthers jersey. That's why everybody will think that he was with them.
But let me tell you what happened with that. They actually beat us that year in a championship game in Port Chester, the CYP tournament. Lamar took his jersey off. Okay, they asked him to come over. Take a picture with us. Remember now, Lamar went to school with Eric Barkley.
Right.
High school, okay? We were all boys. So Lamar went there to take the picture. But here's what I want to tell people that's watching this. Look at the jersey he's wearing. It has an Adidas logo. Everybody knows the Panthers were Adidas, Riverside was Nike. There were never anything else but Nike back then. So, and back then, you didn't wear anything else but who you were represent. I mean, even now. Now it might be even worse, okay? So if you look at that shirt closely, you'll see it's Adidas logo. That's what we were. We were the Panthers were Adidas, okay? So I understand why people don't see that and why they took that picture and they ran with it. And I'm like, ain't that something? So I took a picture with Eric Barkley. What does that mean? Was he a Panther? He was in a Panther. We just took a picture.
Right. Now, on the subject of Adidas, how did that come about, with you joining forces with Sonny Vaccaro, and getting the sponsorship? Tell me the story about how that took place.
I think that was around 1991, something like that. We had Zenon Hamilton. Zenon Hamilton at the time was considered one of the top five players in the country, with Allen Iverson, Felipe Lopez, Antoine Walker, Zenden, I believe it was Danny Fortson that were the top five, okay? So Sonny had left Nike. They just had their breakup. And him and Howie Garfinkel were close at the time. So he told Howie that, he wanted to create his own camp. He was going to take ABCD, because that was his name, from the Nike and move it to wherever he was going to go. And Howie said, you got to get this kid Zenon Hamilton. How do I get him? He said, call Gary Charles. Now, this was before cell phone. So Howie called me up, said, hey, have you heard of Sonny? I said, yeah, I hear him on the radio, so on. I know what he did with Michael. He said, well, he's going to call you. You mind if he call you? I'm like, sure, he can call me. I thought the man was going to call me a week later, whatever it was. And I hang up the phone from Howie. I was about to jump in the shower 2 minutes later. My phone rang. Gary Charles? Yes, Sonny Vaccaro. And we started to talk. He asked me if I could come to the Final Four so we could speak. And I did. It was my first time I went to a Final Four. And went up to his room, met him, met his wife, who was one of the most beautiful women I ever met in my life. And to this day, just in and out, just a beautiful person. And I said to myself, any man who could end up with a beautiful woman like this must know what he's doing. And I stuck my hand out and I said, I'm with you. And I was the first shoe company that he signed.
Wow. So
and
you
asked
were
me, could I help him get others?
So you basically the Panthers. All right. So let me rephrase it down for everybody who's watching. The Panthers were the first program that he signed under Adidas.
Under Adidas. See, because prior to that, what people don't know is that the first year when we went to ABCD camp, it was under Converse. So Sonny signed a 2-year deal with Converse to do their camp under their umbrella. And so we went under Converse. In the second year, Sonny had already made a deal with Adidas, but because he had a 2-year contract with Converse, in the second year, we went to ABCD camp, which was in Ypsilanti, Michigan,
Right.
knowing that we were leaving to go to Adidas. But even before that, Sonny had us wearing LA gear. So how about that? So we had LA gear, and I think the year when we were in California, we beat Shea Cotton. I think our sweatsuits were LA gear, and they had the hoodies. So we actually, when we was walking in the game, I had everybody walking single file with the hoodies on, like we were in the Army. And after we beat them, the place was going crazy. I had everybody put them back on, and we walked out in single file. So we try to tell people, hey, this is what we're supposed to be doing. So before Oakland Soldiers became Oakland Soldiers and all this stuff, now we already doing it.
Man, that's big right there, man. Shout out to Sonny Vaccaro. He changed a lot of lives, man. He created opportunities for you and so many people in this grassroots industry.
He told me, I'll tell you what he had said to me, that, look, Gary, we're going to start from grassroots. All right, let's start young. Let's get these guys. Let's see who could become the next Michael Jordan. And that's what led to Kobe Bryant. It was a year that Kobe's dad would be driving to my house, or I'd be driving to Philly, again, before a cell phone. So to have meaningful meeting without anyone knowing, that's what we were doing. And then Sonny moved out here. For a couple months, people thought Sonny moved here because of Felipe and Lamar. He didn't. It was because of Kobe.
Right.
Well, we couldn't tell that to people, because if we would have told Nike, they might have jumped all over it. But people didn't realize how good Kobe was, but I did. And I kept saying to Sonny, this is the kid. So I put everything on Kobe. And here's the other thing that everyone don't know. Kobe was the reason why Nike created a grassroots side to them. Okay? It was because of Kobe. By losing Kobe at the time, Phil Knight had asked people, how did we lose this kid? And obviously, my name came up, Sonny's name came up, said, well, Sonny's got that grassroots program, and so they get to the young kid. So Phil Knight said, well, that's not going to happen anymore. Let's create our own branch. And it did. So all these haters out there, Sonny haters or Gary Charles, I need to be thanking us, because there's a whole lot of y'all making money or jobs because of what Sonny and I did with Kobe. And you'll thank Kobe, because he was the one that's created all the different shoe companies doing the things that they're doing right now.
No, I mean, hey, everybody got to pay homage to y'all, man, because y'all did a lot. And I must say, from those days to now, I could say that Adidas, they've been very smart in their marketing. Now, I could give you 2 occasions on why they've been so smart. Now, the first one, when they signed Kobe, Tracy McGrady, Jermaine O'Neal, and I want to say one other person, could have been somebody else. Tim Thomas at that time. You know what I'm saying? They started out young, signing the players to those deals.
That was all because of grassroots. That's what started off. Let's do it from grassroots. We're not gonna get the pros. Let's start young with those guys. That was Sonny's idea. That was his idea.
And it paid off well. Even though Kobe left for Nike, you know what I'm saying? That was smart. You know what I'm saying? That was, that was a good way to start out.
I just didn't want to pay that money at the time, and at that point, obviously I had moved on my program, so I wasn't as close to Kobe at that time because I was in my program and I'm working on Wall Street because Kobe's family asked me to come and represent Kobe on tell him who we introduced to Kobe and the family, asked me to work for him 3 different times, and I said no all 3 times. And Kobe's family said, "Come on, Gabby, come with us." I'm like, I wanted to be near my kids, like my own kids. I wanted to be able to raise them. Yeah. And I said, "Nah, Kobe, you're gonna be just fine." So for a while, obviously, I stayed in contact. I would go out there at time, see the family, see Cole, go to a game, whatever. But now at that point, Lamar is off and running. So now I'm paying attention to Lamar. I'm paying attention to the Panthers because we're growing. I'm paying attention to my job on Wall Street. So now my mind was somewhere else. So because probably if I would have stayed as close, I might have been able to keep Kobe with Adidas. But at that time, it was business.
Right.
Adidas wasn't going to take care of business. He had to do what he had to do.
Yeah. No, but you guys did some great things. The second part I'm going to allude to was 2015. When they did the All-American Camp at LIU Post. Now, the reason why I'm bringing that up is because they had the All-Star game at Rucker Park that summer, which was genius because they actually had college coaches out there that night. And that might be the only time you'll ever see college coaches in the projects at night.
It was big time.
Watching the players. I don't even think Nike, Converse, Puma, Under Armour will ever be able to top that. So that's why I said that was genius.
It was. It really was. Chris Rivers did a masterful job, making that happen over there. Because you're right, you'll probably never see college coaches at Rutgers again. Times have really changed. I remember there was a guy that was recruiting Zender Hamilton. And one time he said, listen, I'm coming. Where's he going to be at? And I said, well, he's going to be at Roosevelt Park because at that time I was also coaching older guys, similar to Walker Park, but obviously, in Roosevelt. It was a league at Centennial Park. As a matter of fact, Jerry Ice Reynolds will come out there. Pearl Washington will come out. A lot of guys will come out. So I had Zenden playing with the older team. And this coach came out, and it was amazing because he was like you said, he was in right there in the thick of it all, watching the game. And his name is Scott Perry, who is currently the general manager of the New York Knicks. Scott at the time was at the University of Michigan. Okay, and from time to time, him and I talk about that. How I'm like, Scott, you was right there in the mix of it, watching that game, trying to get Zenden to commit to Michigan. It's unbelievable.
And then he committed to St. John's, which was crazy. Like, how was your relationship with, the local area schools when you were still with the Panthers?
You know what? It took them a couple of years because at first in Long Island, remember now, we were first. So they didn't know anything about it. They didn't know what my motives were, anything like that. So it took a couple of years for them to start to realize that, okay, this guy's got the best interest of these kids. But as I said to them, you guys were so just happy if a kid just went to college, whether it's D3 or D2 or anything like that, not realizing that a lot of these kids had Division I potential. And I was able to bring that out to the forefront. So when it was all said and done, I was cool with them. And then I ended up helping some of them get shoe contracts.
That's big right there, man. That's really big.
So all of that started back then.
Yeah.
Okay, we created a roadmap for what other people started to do.
Yeah, man. I mean, your resume says it all. So, let's talk about, the Panthers in the 2000s. You guys had so many players during that time. So you had Jason Fraser, Charlie Villanueva, Taquan Dean,
We
Curtis
had a
Sumpter.
team. Let me just say this. The year before those guys, we had a team. And again, remember now, there wasn't all these teams all over the country. I mean, every corner at that time. So on our second team, one particular year, it was Sebastian Telfair coming off the bench. Sebastian Telfair, Charlie Villanueva, Curtis Sumpter, because they were young. This kid named Major Wingate. Major was 6'10" out of South Carolina. This is at the time when you can get somebody from everywhere. I was one of the reasons why they changed the rules of the state rules. Okay, I'm one of the reasons why. And Jason Fraser, that was coming off the bench. And it was so funny that Sebastian, when we would travel, came up with a nickname for them. He called himself the Doodle Squad. Okay, and he said, "Man, why we gotta come off the bench like we doodle or something like that?" And I'm like, "Bassie, wait your goddamn turn." Because on the guys who were starting, it was the older guy. There was a young man by the name of Eric Ferguson who ended up going to Arkansas. There was Kenny Adeleke. Kenny was on that team. So each guy, Tristan Smith, who ended up originally going to St. John. So his first year he went to St. John, then he transferred. So Tristan was from Amityville.
Mm-hmm.
So he was on the team. Eric King was from Lincoln. So Eric King was on the team. I think he went to St. John also. So in other words, those older guys were there. So Bassie and them were on the bench. So then, obviously, like you were talking about the Charlie team, what people don't remember is that Lenny Cooke had been playing with us for a year and a half. And I had to make some decisions because Lenny could be a lot to deal with at the time. And I made a decision that, and he was the number one player in the country. And people will notice, I went to a friend of mine, Tyrone Green, who had brought him to the table. Tyrone Green was also the guy who brought me Joakim Noah. I said, Ty, we had to let Lenny go. And everybody thought I had lost my mind. And I said, we got to make room for the other guy.
Mm-hmm.
The other guy turned out to be Charlie Villanueva. So I had made that decision that it was going to be Curtis and Charlie, that were going to be the guys with Jason Fraser. And Bassie had been playing, like I said, Bassie was with us the year before. And that's around the time when Tiny started his program. And Bassie's brother came and he said, look, Bassie is going to go play with Tiny. And I said, I understand. With your brother, we win games by 20. Without him, we'll still win by 10. So it's all good. And losing Bassie, we gained Taquan Dean, at the time. And then we also had Gary Irvin on the team, who ended up at Mississippi State. But then Gary did something I didn't like. He went to play in an event that we were also going to be in. And he said, don't worry, I'll play with you next. I was like, no, you're done. So, and then,
cut him off just like that.
Huh?
You just cut him off like that.
I did. I just cut him off just like that. Yeah, he always remind me of that too. Because Gary was a phenomenal ball player. I love Gary. I love his tenaciousness. But I had to do what I had to do. And then getting him off the team, we ended up with Showtime, Dow Hill. Okay? And first when Gary got off, we actually was starting Marvin McCullough. So Marvin McCullough was our starting point guard. He ended up going to Iona. But then we had Showtime. So I had to tell Marvin, I'm sorry, man. It's time for the show. Okay? And show ended up going to St. John. And so Marvin would come off the bench. But that was, I think we won 5 or 6 championships that year. We didn't lose that particular year with the Charlies and the Jason Fraser. We beat Melo's team out in Vegas. We beat, in LA, we beat Chris Bosh. There was Chris Bosh and Ike Diego's team they were called the Texas Blue Chip. We beat, in a championship, we beat Darren Williams, team that year. Earlier in the Bob Gibbons tournament, we beat Raymond Felton. So we were, matter of fact, we mercied the team that Amari Stoudemire, Travis Outlaw, and Duane Washington won. So think about that team. Those three guys. Duane Washington was a McDonald's All-American and went to Memphis. And obviously the other two guys were pros. We mercied that team. That was the last tournament that Gary Urban played with us that particular year. Okay,
Right.
but we were that team, and they were great teams, across the country, based on some of the names I just gave you.
Right.
Yeah, it was special times back then.
So, you already answered the question about Sebastian. So, that's answered. So, with Lenny
But
Cooke.
Bassey was so good, so that was 8th grade when he was playing with us, and he was like,
Right.
I should be starting. And, it was just like, Bassey, everybody had to wait their turn. You're going to have to wait yours too, man. You're in the 8th grade.
He didn't want to wait.
He didn't want to wait, man. He didn't want to wait. And you know what? It didn't help. I told Sterling to leave him home from ABCD because I said, if you bring him, now there's going to be no turning back. And sure enough, Sterling bought him anyway. Sterling was one of my assistant coaches. And
Shout out to Sterling Nunnally, man. That's my guy.
So Sterling bought him. And Bassey ended up playing that year at ABCD camp. So in his mind, I should be playing. But, what I felt bad about is that I didn't even take Tristan Smith, who was our starting corner guard.
Mm-hmm.
And Tristan always thought that, that wasn't right. I didn't do that on purpose. I tell Bassey right now, I wanted you to stay home. I told Sterling not to bring you. Okay, you still have years to go. All right. So that just created all hell for me the rest of the summer with Bassey.
Wow. Now, about Lenny. So, he had the documentary that came out some years ago. Like, when you saw that, I know some of it might have been filmed that summer when he was at ABCD, and I guess he may have played with you or wasn't with you in the tournament in Vegas.
So,
go on, I'm sorry.
So Lenny had been playing with us, like I said, but it's funny, he was playing with a 16 and under team with a couple of those guys. And he was cool with that because he was with the Curtis Sumters and some of the guys, those people. So we let them play there. He could have played up. So Lenny came to ABCD the year before LeBron. I'm trying to remember, he might have even been the MVP. He was definitely the MVP for the underclassmen. But Lenny was that good. Lenny was one of the most special players I ever saw.
Mm-hmm.
He was really that good. Matter of fact, that year, before I let him go in the tournaments we were playing in, the second year, he played with us. Lenny probably had 35 against Raymond Felton, 30 against Darren Williams, 28 against Travis Outlaw. I mean, Lenny was just, he was special. But I just had a feeling it just wasn't going to last because you could just see where he was going head-wise. And I'm the type of guy who, listen, I'm just not dealing with it, okay? I don't care how good you are. And it didn't hurt that I knew I had Charlie Villanueva either, okay, at the time.
Right.
We ended up playing 12 years in the NBA. And I tell people all the time, be aware of the competition because that should help you make a decision on doing the right thing. If not, you can end up on the bench, okay? So Lenny was great. Then the second year at ABCD, so literally maybe 3 weeks before ABCD, I told Lenny we had to part companies. Okay, maybe, yeah, might have been because you know what? We had our last tournament together with Lenny, the second year was Rumble in the Bronx, which is held in June.
Right.
So it was probably maybe a week after, and I think part of it was that he had gotten some text, he got thrown out of a game, and I said, you know what, I'm not dealing with it anymore. So the show against LeBron was phenomenal. And after that, that's when LeBron took off, and Lenny went, the other way. That's the game in which LeBron really took off, okay? And, I watched Lenny's episodes, and I noticed that they never talked to me, for it. But they always call me for his videos. His people always call me. Everyone that's doing a thing about Lenny, first thing Lenny does, call Gary Charles.
Wow.
To get films on him. But they never want to interview me in regards to Lenny, even though we had him for a couple of years, okay?
Right.
And the thing is that sometimes people don't want to hear the truth. And I'm one of those guys, I'm just going to be real about it. But Lenny, like I said, really was one of the most phenomenal players I ever saw. But like I tell kids, even to this day, the difference between sometimes you making it and not making it is listening, okay? A lot of guys try to reinvent the wheel or they instead of following the yellow brick road that's already out there, they want to deviate off the road. What the hell are you doing? The road's been written. It's been paved already. Follow the damn yellow brick road, man. You'll get there. But no, they want to deviate. And that was Lenny.
So, with him, like, with everything that happened afterward, do you feel like had he stayed disciplined, do you feel like if he had gone to a college for at least a year, and do you think he would have made the NBA?
Yeah, you know what? I think if Lenny would have stayed disciplined and he chose the right word, Lenny played in the McDonald's All-American game. Lenny played in a Magic, round ball All-American game, the game that Sonny used to do, against the best, and played great in those games. If he played in college for a year, he would have been a first-round draft pick, which meant he would have had a 3-year guaranteed deal, which meant he would have had 3 years to develop his jump shot and other things. Because when you sign someone to a 3-year deal, especially back then, they typically hold on to you so they don't lose their money for 3 years. And that gives you a chance to grow. So yes, I do believe it would have happened. But even if Lenny just would have been disciplined, he would have been okay, just that he just wasn't disciplined. Because I tell people all the time, all you need is one team to draft you. So
Right.
even then, when he didn't get drafted, the Seattle Supersonics, which they were called at the time, asked him to come in. Now, Lenny probably don't think a lot of people remember, but I remember. The first thing he did, he went and threw a big party. Lenny, you didn't get drafted. What are you doing? Stay humble. He threw a big party, somewhere, I think it was in Manhattan. And that didn't make the people in Seattle feel good. Right? I tell guys all the time, when these NBA teams are spending millions of dollars, man, they send private investigators to check your friends out.
Yeah.
Check the people that brought you up. They check everything. I cannot tell you how many times private investigators used to be at my house. It took me a while to finally figure out. Oh, okay. They want to know who's around Lamar Odom, who's around Speedy Claxton, who's around Charlie Villanueva, who's around Malik Allen, who's around Mike James. Okay, I mean, the idea that all the pro that we had of our program, I tell people all the time, is because they listen. When they asked me for advice, I gave it to them and they listened.
Right.
People didn't expect this from Danny Green, but he followed the yellow brick road. I can tell you college coaches didn't expect Maurice Harkless to be in the league. And I said, this kid has pro potential. You just got to be able to keep a foot up his behind. They didn't believe it. Look at Mo. Okay? So a lot of guys was like that. Mike James, if you would have told me, when Mike James was playing with us, we went down to Boo Williams tournament. He's getting our butts kicked. And this kid was really kicking out behind. He had like 40 on us. And somebody kept yelling out Bubba Chuck. And we were like, who the hell is Bubba Chuck? Turned out to be Allen Iverson. And I remember Mike being on the bench at the time, like, wow, this guy's phenomenal. I mean, he was just, he was special. Mike James ended up having a longer NBA career than Allen Iverson. I mean, obviously, he didn't have the spectacular career that AI had, because obviously AI had a spectacular career. But imagine Mike James lasted longer in the NBA than AI, a guy he was looking at, sitting on the bench like, oh my God. But all Mike did was, I said, Mike, I want you to do this. Okay, do this, Mike. Okay, you do this. Boom. All right. And that's what happened with a lot of our guys. They just listen.
Right.
They give them a chance.
Yeah, like, and then you mentioned that the Showtime, they always hit you up when they need footage of Lenny, but you said that they don't never want to interview you. I honestly, I believe that that's accurate, because a lot of these entities, like let's say a Showtime, HBO, Bleacher Report, Overtime, whatever the case may be, like these entities, they want to capture the glitz and glamour. Some stuff they don't want to reveal, because they gotta keep it, they gotta keep it looking good. They gotta keep it looking a certain way, which is why platforms like mine, we sitting here right now, we're talking, like, what I'm saying, like, this raw, this is uncut, this is real stories that the general public would never have known about. these big corporations aren't gonna put it out there. So
You know, now I don't want to speak on that. When I met, they didn't want to talk to me. I met Lenny's people, whoever was doing it, and maybe that's part of it. You know, I don't know. But obviously with Showtime, it was untrue. And I'm surprised with Ron doing that about Lamar playing with them that year when they were 56-1. When anyone that was around know who he was with. And you're right, Lamar obviously tells everybody he was with us. And he even would go as far as on the HBO show to tell people that my family chose Gary Charles because Gary Charles was a black businessman doing well. And they wanted me to be with him. So Lamar always, say that. I'm just surprised that the guys, like even Eric Barkley, as you know, was on Instagram saying that Panthers never beat me 3 times, so it's not true. So that's the reason why I came out with that video. And that's why I said, well, Eric, let me show you. Now,
the one in 96 at IS8, yeah.
You got it. But again, because guys keep doing that, let me set the record straight and why I'm telling them it was 3 times that particular year. That year, we beat them in Portchester in March. CYP was a phenomenal event, back then. And Speedy Claxton was the MVP that year in that one. So Speedy won MVP, not Lamar, Speedy. Then we were going to play them at IS8. That's the game you saw. But in the semi-final game, I didn't play Lamar in the second half because he showed up late. I didn't play him at all. He showed up late. I didn't play him. And Lamar would tell you that. And we played against Shaheen Holloway team. And we beat them. Okay? Now, that night, so that's the semifinal. The championship was the next day. But that same night, we had a game in a tournament in Riverbank State Park. That was it was called the Saboa tournament. Okay? The Saboa. Well, guess what? Guess who we played that night in the championship? Riverside. That night, we beat Riverside that night in the championship with Eric Barkley and the team, Elton Brand, Ron Artest, Reggie Jesse, Anthony Glover, and we beat them. Okay? So that was 2. And then the next day, the one that video I said that, we beat him in the championship that day. That's 3, Eric. So, I'm not making that up. And don't get me wrong, there was at a point in which that seemed like in the fall, and I say they would get us. And then we're playing the swing, we get them. And then in the fall, they get us. It was going like that, for a while. All right. So don't cheapen our history. And I've said to Thurman before, like, Thurman, we beat you more than a couple of times. All right. Until I'm dead, stop with the revisionist history because I'll show you the proof. And that's what E-Bark made me do because I didn't want to do that, at that time.
Right.
Okay? But your history, Riverside, in my opinion, and the Gauchos are 1-1-8. Every single grassroots program in the country owe a gratitude to those programs. They paved the road. Mm-hmm. So to me, you don't need to muddy up the water with revisionist history. Okay? Pay us some respect. Because we kept you honest also by having a program to go compete. And that's the way I've always looked at it. That we needed the Riverside. We needed the Gaucho because we needed something to strive to. And that's the way I've always took it. I took pride when we played against a Kenny Pretlow's team or a Thurman player team at that time when they were with them. By the way, speaking of Thurman player, the time when I met Stephon Marbury at that age, Thurman was coaching the team, the little lad. But it was a team called Young Life.
Yeah.
Thurman goes way back too, man. Thurman goes way back. Thurman's my man.
But yeah, I was about to say, okay, so ABCD camp. You were working that camp for many, many years. Camp talk
director.
About that camp.
Camp director now. Camp director.
Let me rephrase that. Camp director. You directed that camp for many years.
I was one of them, yeah. Yeah, with Gary Caesar and Bobby Hosting.
Talk about the experience of directing such a great camp.
You know what? That was so special because you got to see the future young. You got to see these guys real humble, not knowing how great they're going to be. I can remember seeing a Dwight Howard who was a young kid, but was built like Superman. It was unbelievable, even at that time. Every time you ask him something, he'll respond, yes, sir. Yes, sir. watching O.J. Mayo in the 8th, 9th grade or that battle, O.J. versus Lance Stevenson, and Lance not backing away, phenomenal. Watching Greg Golden versus Kevin Love, phenomenal. Then Lenny Cooke, LeBron, phenomenal. Watching Kobe, let me tell you this, Tim Thomas was the #1 player of the year. And watching Kobe trying to prove to people, no, it should be me. Watching Jermaine O'Neal, all in the same camp. And I remember Kobe did a dunk, and he ran to me and he said, was that better than Stefan's? Because I always tell people, even now, the best dunk I ever saw at ABCD was Stephon Marvin. I claim that as the #1 dunk. People say it's the Tracy McGrady. I am the historian, and it's Stephon, okay? So my rule, my game, okay? So Kobe did a dunk, though, and he turned around and said, was that better than Stephon? And I said, nope. He said, yeah, but that's how involved he was. That was Kobe in the most ferocious. Well, him and Kevin Garnett are probably the 2 most ferocious players I saw in high school. Wow. Kevin was no joke either. Yeah, the 2 most ferocious, okay? So Carmelo coming there. Watching Tracy come in, somebody that was not even supposed to get an invitation, we put him in as a favor. That was a favor. And it's like, Tracy, now mind you, for a while, for a day or two, I was getting confused. I kept thinking I was watching the same kid because some of the mannerism was the same. But the other kid was Stormont Swift. If you go back and film, you see they built the same way, they dunked the same way, they do all these things together. It took me a minute before I realized there was 2 different ball players I was watching, because sometimes I purposely don't look at anything. I don't want to know if they were star. I just want to see with my own eyes. And one of the best point guards I think I ever saw was Sean Livingston. And what people don't know is that he hurt his leg his rookie year. Okay. And people didn't think he'd ever play again. And he still ended up with an NBA career. Sean Livingston was special. A total special, point guard who never said more than 2 words. And I'll tell you another player that made me feel so good, because he might have been number 3 on his team at that time. And now look at him, and that's Mike Conley. Okay, Mike Conley was behind Greg Oden, who I know people want to say a lot of things, did deserve to be the #1 pick at that time, in front of Kevin Durant. I know people look at me like I'm nuts, but Greg Oden was that good. Okay? And obviously his knee injury got him. As a freshman, he led Ohio State to the national championship game. He was that good. And there was another kid named Daquan Cook on that Speech team. So he was #2, and Mike Conley was #3. Okay? And look what it's done. I kept watching it, and I said to Sonny, this kid belongs on the All-Star team. He said, what? I'm like, so Sonny's having that type of week. So Mike, and never said a word. But you see now, he don't say a word in the NBA. Yeah, he said he was less back then. Mike Conley. Right. So ABCD, just you think about just the stars that came through all those years. And I remember watching a kid who I thought was so special. I thought, my God, who is this kid? And it turned out to be Paul Pierce. Okay. I was like, oh my, and he was the truth. Everything. He was just so, so special. I remember another kid who, he was really, really good. And to this day, he still talks to me about why he didn't get the MVP. To this day, he still gets upset. To this day. And I said, dude, Steph's getting the MVP. He's killing everybody out here, and we're in New York. Are you out your damn mind? He's getting the MVP. Well, the kid turned out to be Sharif Abdul-Rahim. Okay? And Sharif really was that good. And even to this day, when I see him, he still reminds me that we didn't give him the MVP. Okay? So we still have a laugh about that. But Sharif was special, also. So when you go down the line, you just think about, certain guys, and even as grown men, they come to me, they'll say, tell someone how good I was. Tell them how good I was. They can't. And it makes you feel good knowing that was a special moment for them too.
Shout outs to the ABCD camp, man. I wish that that it was still around, because before it shut down before I even got a chance to cover it. Like, I hear so many people's stories about that camp, and I wish that it was still around. You know, would you, DeCesar, Sonny, and Bobby Hartstein ever come back together and bring that back? I feel like that would be big for the culture.
We thought about it. We talked about it. There was a time, Sonny and I probably talked about it 3 or 4 years in a row. I think what ends up happening is this, that I used to tell Sonny, you're the only man I know that could go over unlimited budget. Okay. That's how much money he would spend to make the camps and stuff special. And I think anything less, he didn't want to do it. You know, because he wasn't, at this point, he's now with a shoe company. He just felt that he needed that extra to do it, because there may not be a month that goes by without someone calling or texting or DMing or whatever, say, come on, man, bring back ABCD. Because if you were there, you just knew just how special ABCD was. It was really special.
The MBPA Top 100 camp is a great event. You know, I love it. You know, I've been there twice. It's a top-notch experience because last year they included the college coaches. You know, they got the NBA scouts there.
Right.
It's all good and well, but ABCD, nothing like it.
The electricity of the camp. And you know what? You walked in, I don't care when you walked in. If you walked in and you look to your right, Tom Kachowski would be standing right there in the middle in his spot, not sitting, just standing there on his perch. You know, you knew. And the kids would look for that. There go Mr. Kachowski. Let's go. Okay, it was special. It was special.
Yeah, man.
And every college coach in America, that's where they were at, ABCD. ABCD was special, man.
So how was it like, this is the last thing I'm going to talk about as far as ABCD. So like, how was it like competing with Nike for certain kids? Like
At that time, we were so confident in ourselves. It never occurred to us that Nike, maybe Adidas is here, Nike was there. Because you know what? It starts from the grassroots level. And we had guys that could get it done. We had guys that just had players. You look at Jimmy Salmon, like people look at Jimmy Salmon as a Nike guy, whatever. Jimmy was with Adidas, and here's the thing. A lot of guys, that's where they started. And like, for example, with my tournament in Vegas, a lot of guys, Nike programs or whatever program will tell you the reason that they come was because I helped them get started. Because a lot of them were with Adidas. Mac Irvin Fire, they were Adidas. Okay, a lot of those guys were Adidas. We were a family.
Right.
And you don't just forget that. The love is still there. We're still boys. But now it's business. You with this, you with that shoe deal, But at the end, it's like, hey, we're going to Gary Charles thing, man. That's our OG. Let's go. So, the rivalry back then, we looked at it as it was us. Period. We didn't think no other way. That people was competing against us. We were the top-notch one. That's honestly how we looked at it. We didn't give it a second thought. They would get theirs, we would get ours. We would keep it moving.
Yeah, man, that's big time right there. So what made you decide to give up coaching?
Doing it for over 30 years, because I think you said, whatever it was you said, almost 30. Because I started, I think, the kids in Roosevelt, either 86, 87. That's when I started them. And then the Panthers program was probably, 89, 90, because, I coached Wally Zerbiak. Wally Zerbiak played with us, also, okay? And now I started doing the tournament in Vegas. And when you do high-level stuff like that, you have to get your time. I couldn't get my job, Vegas tournament, and the Panthers is through justice. And plus the fact that now I was not on a shoe contract. And now I'm saying to myself, okay, what am I going to do? I'm going to terrorize spend $60,000, $70,000 out of my pocket every year for this program. I put my time in.
Right.
I put my time in. Now I can go ahead and concentrate on something else. So that's what it came down to.
Yeah. Well, shout outs to the Panthers, man. It was a great program right there. So we're gonna move on to the next phase, the tournaments. Now, talk about the big time tournament in Vegas. How long have you been running that? And just tell me a little bit about it.
Sure. So the big time, we started as Fab 48, started in 2010. And the reason we started it was that Sonny has stopped his event, and Dino Chagonis approached me about doing a tournament in Vegas, and that we need to do something. And we still wanted to go to Vegas. So I said, fine. And his theory was, well, we're only going to get 48 teams. So let's just call it Fab 48. Truth is, I thought it was a ridiculous name because I thought we'd do a lot better than that. But after a week, he kept bugging. I'm like, okay, fine, we'll call it. I really didn't care. Let's just get these teams. And the first year we had 80-something teams. So I'm like, yeah, Dino, 48, huh? And it was funny because for a couple of years, people kept saying, well, you can't go there. They only take 48. Why are you going to waste your time? I'm like, we're not 48. So, but it would be 48 teams in every gym. So that's the concept we started to develop. We're going to put 48. They should go on with 48 at this school, 48 at this school. But obviously at this point, it didn't matter. See, the name becomes secondary if you run a great event. Now the great event, the name just becomes synonymous. And that's what happened with our event. So now when you're able to get Nike, Adidas, Under Armour to come to your event, that's special. Because, most of the year they're not playing against each other. And I remember the statement that Jay Wright said to me. He said, damn, I had to come all the way to Vegas to see DC Assault play against Team Takeover. In other words, two teams out of DC. I had to come to Vegas to see. It was what was it? Some boys uptown. My mind just went blank. Nike.
Yes, the Wrens.
The Wrens. I had to see New York Wrens versus was it Kamani? I can't believe this Kamani team.
New Heights.
No, huh?
New Heights.
New Heights. I gotta come all the way to Vegas to see New York Reds versus New Heights. I gotta come all the way here to see K-Lo, versus another, a Philly team. It was the Philly Pride. To see them play against the Philly Pride, something like that. And we would laugh about that, but that's the way it was. But I would purposely, when they came to Vegas, I would purposely match them up, and I would tell them, "Nope,
right.
doing this on purpose." Okay, that's what the coaches are here to see.
Right.
So, yeah. So the tournament just kept taking off. It just kept taking off, and that's when we started to create different divisions for people. The invite, the diamond, the platinum, the gold. And I would tell you, I make no bones about it. Look, we're gonna put you where you belong, not where you want to be. Okay, so because every year people want to tell you how great they are, and I used to have this line, and I know everybody think they're the next Barack Obama, but you're not. Okay, so let's be real about it. Okay, nothing wrong with that. And we're trying to get your kid scholarship. So what's this does to make to put your kid in the same gym as John Calipari? He's not looking at them. Let's make sure we get them that scholarship, exposure. And so the coaches would know, okay, I know what level I'm at. Let me go to that particular gym and go find that kid.
Yeah. No, but last year you guys had some talent in the gym. Josh Christopher, Jalen Green, Kyrie Walker, McCord Maker, who signed with Howard.
Yep. Kate Cunningham, Jalen Suggs, Chet Holmgren. It just kept going on. And that's not even including LeBron's son. That's not including Michael Williams.
James, man.
Yep. So it was phenomenal. It was phenomenal.
And Imani Bates.
One of the best you ever seen. And Imani Bates. Okay. Think about that. We just talked about the other one, and we just forgot Imani, who will probably end up being better than all of them. And he was there. And he scored 35 points, but people left talking about everything else. What about that young man that was dunking through his legs? He did an in-game dunk or something that I'd never seen.
Jim McGotwick.
Huh?
Jim McGotwick.
Yeah.
I saw
like
him
the #1 on ESPN. Come on. It was unbelievable.
And he's draft bound for this year because I think this October last year around my birthday. So he was participating in a dunk contest in Brooklyn by the pier.
Mm.
And I believe he got paid for that. So once I seen that, I'm like, there's no way he can go to college. He's definitely going to the NBA draft. So I'm like, okay, this dude is for real.
Yeah, oh my God, the dunks he was doing in the games. and Jonathan Kuminga was there.
Yeah.
Kuminga was there. Okay, so he was playing. So that was a phenomenal game, the game that he had. Because he had JT Thor. He was in with JT Thor.
Yeah.
They went up against Chet Holmgren and Jalen Suggs in one game. I mean, it was just one phenomenal game after another. And the show that Jalen Green and Josh Christopher put for the ages. It was for the ages.
Talk about LeBron dunking in the layup line with his team.
You know what? I thought that was so special. I thought it was beautiful. And people said, well, other parents don't do it. Well, yeah, other parents don't do it because they can't do it. You know, please. Like, stop it already. He was just having fun. And the thing is, he was hyping the crowd. He was hyping his team. What's wrong with that? Why do we have to have so many haters all the time?
Yeah.
Oh, dude, that was special, man.
Because he was doing something that they couldn't do.
He was doing something they couldn't do. That's why you hadn't seen other parents do it. So stop that already. Oh, I just thought it was phenomenal. Yeah. And I'll tell you this. He's a hell of a dad, man.
He is.
He's a hell of a dad. And he doesn't get credit for it for being a hell of a dad. Okay. Yeah. So I thought that was great.
So I mean, I wish COVID. Mom, you okay? I wish that COVID hadn't happened this year because it would have been nice. I would have loved to have gone out there. I know that you tried to do it, but unfortunately things happen, and then there's always next year.
No. It was the right thing to do to cancel. I felt bad because, dude, the teams that were coming this year would have topped all the years. So, but it was the right thing to do, and I just really wanted to be safe. And next year we'll make it even bigger and better.
Indeed, absolutely. So, also talk about the Tip of the Hat Classic in Long Island.
Yeah, you know what? It's really been taking off the last couple of years because now we're bringing in some of the city teams in there. So it's one of my pride and joys. And, Lord willing, we'll have it this year. And this year, some of the teams include boys and girls. We have, Cardoza. And we actually have a special matchup, Stefanak versus Brentwood is another game. We also have Jefferson that's coming in. So, people are calling. People want to play. And, Lord willing, we'll have it. But we'll see. We'll see with this virus situation what's going to happen.
Because from what I'm hearing, chances are the season will start in January. But, certain teams can't leave their state. From what I'm seeing right now, like some states aren't allowing their teams to play in certain events out of state.
Right.
But as long as it's in state, then it's all good.
Exactly. So that's why I kept it that way. So potentially it could be big because it might be one of the first ones. All right. Real good teams on there, and Lord willing, we'll have it. So we'll see exactly what New York State has to say.
Indeed. So this is one of my favorite questions to ask before I lead up to the final question.
Okay.
If you could go back to 1988, what would you tell a younger Gary Charles at 28 as he's starting up a phenomenal opportunity for the youth in Roosevelt, Long Island?
You know what? I tell people this all the time. I've never had one regret. You know what? Like even the opportunity to coach college or represent Kobe and everything else, I didn't. Because I knew raising my kids meant more millions than any other millions I could get. So there isn't a thing I would have changed. Maybe the only thing I would have changed, there was a particular time maybe I wore the wrong hat. Other than that, nothing would have changed, okay, except for my hats. That's it.
Final question: what's next in the future for Gary Charles and Tip of the Hat, the company?
There is something that's coming up. That's going to be announced on Monday.
Okay.
Okay, and stay tuned, for that. But it's time for the next chapter in Gary Charles and other people's lives, and try to make other people's lives better. So stay tuned for the announcement on Monday.
All right, cool. Well, by the time this gets out, it'll already be out. But Gary, thank you for coming on for sharing your testimonial, and I wish you and Tip of the Hat nothing but the best moving forward.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Everybody, this is episode 70 of Hoops Talk with Dave's Joint. Shout outs to Gary Charles, for coming on to tell his story. For those in Vegas and those in all over Long Island and New York City, go check out this episode on YouTube, Facebook, and IGTV. Stay safe, stay blessed. Peace.
Okay. Take care.